You know, the first primary in the nation may well hinge on undeclared voters. We in Florida call them NPA, no party affiliation. 4 in 10 in New Hampshire are undeclared, and unlike in Florida, they can vote in whichever party primary they choose. That is a huge variable and just one of the things so unique about New Hampshire, and we have a great panel here to talk all about that. With us today, straight out of Miami, Max Greenwood, who is the political reporter at the Miami Herald, and Dante Scala, who is professor of political science at the University of New Hampshire and somewhat of a primary expert, as I've been finding as I'm reading. I'm so glad you both are in today on a Sunday. Thanks so much for being here.
You're welcome.
So we have a lot to talk about, and always through a South Florida lens because of what we do. And we have 2 Florida men in this race. And one of them, the governor, Governor Ron DeSantis. I want to talk a little bit about the trajectory of the governor's campaign. Dante Scala, he came out of Iowa in 2nd place, but way below numbers of Donald Trump, and had no numbers to speak of coming into New Hampshire, and kind of left and went on to South Carolina. That was his strategy. He's coming back today. He canceled, his campaign is kind of in flux day by day, it seems like. Ballpark, what is happening with Governor DeSantis' candidacy here?
Well, his candidacy here has been on standby for months now. I mean, he's been out of sight, out of mind in New Hampshire because he's been so focused on making an impact in the Iowa caucuses.
Was that a bad move for him?
Well, I think he saw that as his only move. What's striking about the primary calendar is Iowa Republicans and New Hampshire Republicans are very different from each other. Like many more religious conservatives in Iowa than in New Hampshire, to just give one example.
Yeah.
So sometimes campaigns make a choice, and they decide where's our best way to kind of break through. And DeSantis, for better or worse, chose Iowa. And as a result, New Hampshire was put on the back burner. So for the last few months, we've been hearing about Nikki Haley all the time, Chris Christie somewhat, Donald Trump, of course, all the time. But Ron DeSantis has not been a story because he just hasn't been here, he hasn't been on the air, and so forth. So you come to New Hampshire out of Iowa, and you really just don't have much to fall back on, and you only have a week to make something happen.
Yeah. You know, it was interesting because Iowa conservatives, I think his campaign thought were much more like Florida conservatives. Max, we've been covering the governor for a long time, and we saw his imprint on the state legislature, taking Florida very conservative in policy. You know, does that play here as well as it plays in Iowa? And if not, what happens now?
You know, it really doesn't play in New Hampshire as well as it plays in Iowa or Florida, for that matter. We actually just published a story this morning. I spent the past several days talking to dozens of New Hampshire voters, asking them what they think of the governor's war on wokeness, these culture war issues, critical race theory, DEI.
You haven't heard that word here at all.
Woke. Very seldom, very
Yeah.
seldom. And look, a lot of voters will tell you, it's not that I don't think it's important, it's just not that important. It's not the issue I'm voting on. I keep hearing immigration and the economy.
And border, yeah,
Border
they use the
security.
word border. We call it immigration. Here they call it the border. Do you get the distinction between that?
Oh yeah, you can't help but get the distinction because Max's point is well taken. I mean, on the air, in mail pieces, it's all about the border, and also just the difference. You know, New Hampshire Republicans tend to be very ambivalent and very cautious about talking about social issues like abortion, gay marriage, and so forth. They prefer not to talk about those things, and they prefer their candidates, including their presidential candidates, to put those things, again, kind of secondary, not front and center.
You know what I find so fascinating about that? You say that, and I think, live free or die. You see that on all the license plates. That's the state motto. And Governor DeSantis, and actually every candidate, talks about freedom and personal freedoms. But personal freedoms to one might be different personal freedoms to others, and I think New Hampshire takes that freedom to libertarian lengths, stay out of my business. And so especially the abortion issue, what I think a lot of people are going to think that for Republicans and for Democrats, the abortion issue and the abortion rights issue will be a huge draw to the polls. Is that here?
It was a big issue in 2022. I mean, the midterms, I think, were dominated by the overturn of Roe v. Wade. And it's certainly, what social issues do in New Hampshire is energize Democrats, but it divides Republicans. because you find a lot of New Hampshire Republicans right in that kind of mushy middle when it comes to abortion. They're ambivalent. They feel two ways about it. They think there should be some restrictions, but not too many. Whereas Democrats, they know exactly where they stand.
Yeah. The thing that we saw coming out of, especially in polling out of Iowa, not only the numbers of supporters, but the numbers of enthusiastic supporters, the enthusiasm factor. And we saw last night at the arena, not a fully packed arena, but a definitely packed arena. Donald Trump had one of his signature rallies. We saw people waiting in single-digit temperatures for literally 10 hours. Max, the enthusiasm factor for these candidates into New Hampshire seemed to sort of only change with Nikki Haley.
Correct. I mean, look, it's hard to compete with Donald Trump for a captive audience. I went to a Trump rally here in Concord on Friday night. I talked to one woman who had been waiting outside since 1 p.m. It was probably 15 degrees outside, so she was freezing, trying to warm up her hands, but she wanted to see the president. Nikki Haley is getting quite a bit of attention right now. I saw her yesterday at a couple stops, and she's packing smaller venues, but certainly filling them up in a way that Ron DeSantis just hasn't managed to. So I think there's a lot of momentum behind Nikki Haley's candidacy here in New Hampshire right now. The question becomes, can she parlay that into enthusiasm going forward?
It is the enthusiasm for Nikki Haley in New Hampshire with Republicans, because there are Republicans who may be looking for an alternative to Donald Trump. To me, if they're conservative Republicans, I would ask why not Ron DeSantis, since that's kind of his lane. But looking for, especially the undeclared, who might be a bit more moderate, Nikki Haley is the Trump alternative vote in New Hampshire. Full stop. Is she not?
Yeah, there's a real, we saw this in Iowa, we're seeing it here too in New Hampshire polling. Moderates and conservatives, both Republicans, kind of live in two different worlds when it comes to Donald Trump. Moderates tend to be rather anti-Trump, but conservatives, and they'll make up most of the electorate. You know, there are a lot of moderates here, more than in Iowa, but still the conservatives are important. They are lined up behind Donald Trump, and to me, that's always going to be the lost opportunity for Ron DeSantis, because he's certainly lined up as being the conservative alternative to Donald Trump. But Haley right now, she's kind of stuck in the moderate lane, and she's got to figure out a way either to cross over, grab some of those conservatives, or expand the number of moderates by bringing in some of those independents you were talking about.
Yeah, for a general election, that would be a feather in her cap, not so much for a conservative Republican primary. Unless moderate independents can vote in it. Like here, okay, we need to take a quick break. I really want to talk about that independent vote. That is so fascinating here. Quick break, and we will do that when we come right back. We are back in the visitor center of the New Hampshire State House, such an historic building. We will talk all about, right now we're talking about all of the uniqueness of the very first primary in the United States with Max Greenwood from the Miami Herald, Dante Scala from the University of New Hampshire. Dante, the independent vote, I find so fascinating in this state. Not because we're not used to in Florida independent votes, and about a third of Floridian voters are here. It's almost 40%. But they can vote in a party primary. And so what a variable that is to the outcome. What's prognosticate that for us? What are you seeing with that independent vote? What are we going to see Tuesday?
So the thing to keep in mind about those undeclared voters, who are the real free agents, right, is that they're a real mixed bag of voters.
Yeah.
Some of them are actually, Republicans. They behave like Republicans. They vote like Republicans. Same with Democrats.
Yeah.
They just choose to keep their partisanship off the public voter rolls.
Oh.
But then there's this group who I would describe as pure independents. They may not be all that political, but they may show up to vote. And so they're the ones who Nikki Haley right now is hoping will turn out in droves, because she has to make the electorate on Tuesday a little less Republican and a lot more independent.
And so Max, at home, the independents sit back and watch the partisan parties duke it out in the primaries. And there is no effect for independents. Here in New Hampshire, as you've been traveling around to the cities, when you find that what Dante is talking about, the people who kind of, it's my business, it's not your business, what are you hearing from them?
Look, I think I'm really hearing that they're leaning toward Nikki Haley.
They are.
I've talked to a lot of folks who are, professed independents, and they'll say, I looked at Ron DeSantis, I've looked at Nikki Haley, I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. Ron DeSantis just doesn't have it. He is he's too confrontational. He's not personable enough.
So you're saying it's the likability factor?
I think there's a big likability factor there. New Hampshire's big on retail politics, and I'm sure Dante can expound on that for us. But look, he's not the best retail politician. That's kind of been established here for a while, and he doesn't seem to have a clear message that resonates here. So in Iowa, he was talking a lot more about his 6-week abortion ban. He was talking a lot more about the culture wars. Here, he's talking about kind of getting government out of people's lives, which
should resonate here, right? Isn't that what it's live free or die is all about?
Yeah, and for DeSantis, it was almost like there was too much too soon. Like he came in at the beginning of last year as kind of like the post-Trump successor,
with a lot of money. And at least last year, a year ago, this time he had numbers.
Yeah, I mean, and with that though come a lot of expectations. So there was, for DeSantis, there were no opportunity for training wheels. Like the training wheels had to be off the campaign from the get-go because expectations were so high, and those DeSantis stumbles early on, really through the first half of the year, kind of weighed on that campaign, and kind of it almost as if he lost his moment before he even got a chance to grasp it fully.
The issues we had started talking about, I talk to voters, wherever we are all over the country, and there are themes. I mean, Americans want, to be successful and to be happy and to raise their kids and to have opportunities. That's not a partisan issue. What I find interesting here is a lot of people are talking about the border as an issue. Immigration, New Hampshire is a white state. I mean, that 98% white. So immigration, it doesn't resonate like it would in South Florida, where more than 50% of the people are from somewhere else for various reasons. So Max, the issues that voters here are looking for when they say border, what else do they say? Economy? The border is an economic issue to them, it sounds like.
It is. I had one man that I talked to bring up a law in Massachusetts that requires the government to provide housing. And he said, look, with all these millions of people flowing over the border, coming up here to New England, it's putting a lot of pressure on state governments to deliver those basic needs. But even going beyond that, I was at a Nikki Haley event yesterday, and she was asked by one person, would you support building a wall along the northern border? She said she would do whatever it had to be done to secure that border and prevent crossings.
I'm guessing she's not talking about Canadians, but people who might come through Canada that are not Canadians.
She specifically mentioned suspected terrorists that had come over across the northern border. So, look, we're very far away from the U.S.-Mexico border.
Yes.
Very far away from Florida's maritime border, but it's still top of mind for people, either for economic reasons, security reasons, or just proximity to Canada.
Yeah. Dante, I don't want to end our discussion without talking about there is a Democratic primary here. However, the Democratic National Committee moved the first primary for Democrats to South Carolina, and New Hampshire said, oh yeah, it's our state law, we're going first. And so explain in a minute what's happening. Joe Biden's not even on the ballot here. Does that matter to Democrats?
Right. So President Biden basically demoted New Hampshire, right, in terms on the Democratic Party's calendar. But of course, the Democratic Party doesn't control what the state does. State can hold the event when it wants to. And so the Secretary of State said, no, New Hampshire's going first, no matter what. And now we have some of these same New Hampshire Democratic leaders are kind of stuck in the middle. They have a strained relationship with Joe Biden thanks to his decision. However, they still want to show that they're loyal Democrats, perhaps in the hopes that in 2028 they'll be restored to their rightful place. So some of them are running this write-in campaign. It'll be very interesting. We haven't seen anything like this since Lyndon Johnson in 1968.
Does it matter? Does it matter?
Well, you know what? If Joe Biden doesn't get a majority of Democrats to write in his name on Tuesday, I think the national political media, which is really bored right now with this whole nomination contest.
They are?
They are. And they will say, you know what? All those stories we hear about Biden being weak in the Democratic base, I wonder if there's something to it, because here are actual Democrats not writing in Joe Biden's name.
Perception is reality in politics in so many ways. Max Greenwood, Dante Scala, I would love you to stick around for something we're doing at the very close of the show. So appreciate your time and expertise and perspective.